Hey guys, so this video is out here, feeling better, light's good. Doesn't really matter because what we're going to talk about today doesn't require a lot of special light. We are going to talk about something that was sent to me. If you guys have seen my Instagram live feeds, I talked about it a couple times. I got a bottle of the new knife pivot lube oil that came to me for testing. This is not a paid review. So this is just an honest review. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So guys, like I said before the intro, we're going to talk about this stuff, which is pretty awesome. As far as I've used it the last week and a half or so, it's been awesome. So you know me, I like to make sure that I'm giving you guys information that I've tested. A lot of times, sometimes there's just stuff that's just theoretical and stuff like that. But so basically, the guys at Knife Pivot Lube reached out to me and asked if I wanted to test a bottle of their product, and I said, yeah, sure. I always like trying new things. So because, you know, some people get stuck in a rut and they think that there's only one thing to use for specific things. But what they've done is they designed from ground up, from what I understand, a lubricant designed solely around what a knife pivot needs: bearings, stuff like that. I will tell you, the only thing I have not done this, and I probably won't test this on, is my out the front, because traditionally oils like this that stay oily have a tendency to gum up those. So I stick with the dry film, like Rem oil or tough lube, I think is what it is. But at any rate, they designed this to be used on knives, and the first knife I used it on was my buck, which it was fairly smooth, but not like that. It wasn't like that. It was not like that. I put a couple drops on it when I got it in a live feed, and immediately I noticed a difference. So this knife was not that old, and I mean, when I say a difference, not like, hey, I just put some lube on my knife. No, like, holy crap, that's a big difference. A marked difference. And that was the first indicator to me that the stuff, they're backing up their claims. So then I took this knife apart, I completely cleaned it, cleaned all the grit, all the old oil and everything out of it, and I put it on again, and it is stupid smooth now. There is no grit, no play. It is, as they say, it will make it fall shut smooth. And it's so the big thing that I always look for is how does the lubricant, how am I going to get it down in there? If it's a pain in the ass, like, that's one of the reasons I like the nano oil, and some of the other ones was they came in this lubricating thing. But the thing with these were, I noticed that you would drop it down in there, but then you would notice it work its way out and up onto the blade. That's another thing that I have not noticed about this. It's a heavier oil. So this is a 10 weight. This is 17 weight, but it's got some wicking, there's some wicking elements that they've added to it that allow it to get down in there with that capillary action. And it sucks right down into that pivot. I watched it when I shot this video earlier, and it came out like crap. There was some weird background noise, so you're getting this all over again. So in the last video, I had not done this knife yet, and I dropped some in, and I just watched, it's like a sponge sucking it down in there. Now, I didn't take it apart, but I did notice, I'm serious, a marked change in this knife, because this knife needs taken apart. It needs cleaned, but now it feels like I did. So this knife is one of my smoother knives, along with this. And they were already really smooth, and then putting that on, I don't feel any grit or anything anymore in there. That's the next thing I want to talk about. They say that it picks up grit and stuff like that, and it keeps it in suspension, so it's not cutting and abrading the steel of your knife. And I was kind of skeptical about that. That's why I put it on dirty knives that had some grit to them, like this one did. This one has some grit just because of the way it was ground, but it also had some weird gritty feel to the pivot. And I put it on this Moorish made, and it typically is hard to get it to deploy. It wants to, like that, and I did that on purpose just to demonstrate, but it smoothed that grit out. And so another thing that I did to see, you know, it gets grit in suspension and it holds it there so it's not getting your knife. I had Nico over the other day, and I sharpened his gent. I touched it up, and I was like, you know what I want to do? And I grabbed my Arkansas stone, which is an oil stone, and not knowing whether you could or not, whether you know, but they came out on their on their Instagram and said, yeah, you can use this for lubricating on sharpening. But so I put it on this stone because if you were going to see anything that was going to be holding grit in suspension, it'd be best way to indicate it would be while you're sharpening on an oil stone. And so I put a few drops of it on there, and I started sharpening the knife. And typically while you're sharpening with one of these stones, you'll start seeing a little bit of steel residue on the stone. And when you wipe it off, and then you have to use something to wipe it again to clean it up. And so I sharpened that entire knife on that, and I could see, just like I would have expected, the oil darkened up, it got black, and it didn't really dry up. It stayed pretty lubricating and things like that on stone. I really didn't see any dry up like if you were using WD-40 you would. But when I wiped it off, I noticed I didn't see, there's no tracks on that. There's no steel residue on that stone, which you're gonna get 9 times out of 10. You're gonna get it unless it's super hard steel. You know, softer steels are more likely to stick to your stone than harder steels. But it gave me a pretty good lubricant on the stone, and their claims that it holds that grit in suspension seem to be true. And I mean, you like I said, you can feel it. A lot of times, it doesn't matter what lubricant you put on. If the knife is gritty and it's still got chunks of grit and gunk down in there, it'll smooth it up a little bit, and your action will be a little bit better, but you'll still feel that. And like I said, I did that with this knife and had not cleaned it up yet, and instantly, the little bit of grit that I was feeling was gone. Same thing with, oh yeah, I did this one. This one has not been apart in a very long time. Had a ton of grit in it. It felt like there was sand in it. You could hear it. You could hear it like that sound when there's grit down in your pivot. You can hear the bearings popping across like grit, especially these ceramic bearings in that plastic race. The only thing I hear now is my detent ball. I don't hear that gritty sound in the pivot itself. So, like I said, I asked them some questions about their formula. I didn't want to get into scientific stuff. I don't want any proprietary information about, you know, what is in it and things like that. But I did have some questions because there are lubes out there that for specific steels you might not want to use. There are oils out there that have got some elements to them that absorb water. They're called hydroscopic. Hydroscopic means that it wants to absorb and take on board some moisture. And so my concern was the sweet smell and things like that you get from it, because it does have a fragrance to it and it smells sweet, and that usually is something that you're smelling and you're immediately thinking there's some glycols of some sort, some sort of sugary substance, glycol, glycogen, glycerin, one of those things that gives it a sweet smell. But those things also do absorb moisture. They take on board moisture. Well, they told me specifically, said, nope, there is nothing in here that is hydroscopic. Everything in here is hydrophobic, which means it repels water, does not try to take it on board. It's all called hydrophilic, I believe is another name for it. So when he told me that, and then he told me that, no, what you're smelling is a fragrance that's added in, I was like, okay, cool. So with that being said, I would not have a problem putting on some of your steels that are more prone to corrosion, as 3V, 4V, some of those steels that you know, that are going to easily start to get some surface rust and surface corrosion. And so something that would absorb water you wouldn't want in there. And that's, once he told me that, I'm like, okay, cool. I can use this on pretty much everything. The other thing is the bottle, and I'm kind of, I like the bottle. I think it's cool. It's childproof. So you have to push down and turn it. And then your needle applicator's in there, so you get that pinpoint accuracy and things like that. But the big thing about it is, like I said, the wicking factor is cool, because I take customers' knives apart when requested. Or a lot of times, if the knife is gritty after sharpening, I'll take it apart and clean it up just because. And so the nice thing about this is like I said, it's a little bit heavier weight than nano oil, but it sucks down in that pivot. It sucks down in there, it gets down in there real quick, and it seems to just do it like that. But, like I said before, what I'm not seeing is knives that I've done that with, I'm not seeing that oil walk its way back up. You can see a little bit of oil residue where the detent ball track is, where you can just ever so lightly see that there's a little bit that has caught some pocket lint. But I'm not seeing that, like where you start to see, where's the knife I did? It's not out here. I did a knife for comparison in the last video where I put nano oil on it, and you can see where it had walked its way back up out of the pivot after sitting. And so the last thing that I wanted to talk about, well, here's one I haven't done yet. Let's see. This is my gent, and the gents are they're a fairly smooth knife. And as you can see, if we can look down in there, you can see it hasn't been cleaned. There's a lot of grit and gunk down in there. Put a drop of it, and we'll hit on the last one. So put a drop of it down in there. It just sucks down in there, and I tried to film the oil getting sucked down in, you just can't see it. There's not a good way to do it. So I put a drop on each side. Let me put a drop on the detent ball. Oh, it's dirty. This knife is dirty. This knife gets carried a lot. This blade is pretty light. I don't think it'll ever be drop shut. But all the grit and nastiness that was in that, it's all gone. And another thing that I wanted to note is over the last week, like I said, first knife I did with this is this knife, and it now is stupid fall shut smooth. It seems to, over time, continue to work and wick its way around in those parts and just hit everything, and it gets smoother. And so the last thing that I was curious about, and I had asked them, I'm one of those guys that like I said, I don't like taking a knife apart. So a lot of times for me to clean my knife, what happens is it gets run under some hot water, because that's one of the big things about bearing knives that I like, is there's gaps in there. You can just wash most of that grit. And so a lot of times I will take a knife and I'll just put it under some hot running water and go like this. The thing that I liked about nano oil is it seemed to have some staying and ability to not get washed off. Not as good as this. I'm not gonna lie, it's not as good as this. I held this under water and then I put soap on it. I washed my hands and made sure I had the knife in my hand, so there was soap and shit, and rinsed it, and it did not wash off. It did not wash out. And so I'm gonna say that it overall, all around, 100% does exactly what they say it's gonna do. And the fact is, it smells like fresh baked cookies. It smells like sugar cookies. It smells good. It's got a really good bottle. The only real concern I have is how long it's gonna stay and have the same amount of lubricity. Big word for, and not evaporate, because it is thin and it feels like it evaporates off your fingers. I haven't seen that yet, but I've only been using it for a week or so. Is there any evaporation that's got evaporatives that are gonna come out and work their way out, and that I'm gonna have to reapply? And the only other concern, which is kind of silly when you really think about all the things I could be concerned about for this oil. This lid, child safety, it's child-proof, but it doesn't have, there's not an actual stopper that I can see. There may be, but I see oil on the inside there. And my only concern is that this might get tipped over, turned upside down in my toolkit, in my knife box, and it leaks. That's my only real concern. So, knife pivot lube, guys. The first, as far as I know, the very first knife designed, or oil designed just for knives, for us guys that are, to quote the guys on the Knife Nuts podcast, those of us that are not filthy casuals. Us true knife weirdos, that every part of everything is under scrutiny. And I'm a pretty picky guy, so like I said, once again, they did not, the only thing they did was provide me this, and it was provided by a third party reaching out to them, say, hey, you might want to, are you interested in this? I'll see if they'll send you some. That's how this started. I did not reach out to them. They didn't reach out to me. It was completely third party. So I'm not making any money off this, but I see it as a good product, and I like to provide it stuff to you guys. I'm always about trying new stuff and let you guys know about it. If it didn't work, you would know. But I mean, this right here, that's not a super high-end knife. I like it, I love it, but this is a mass drop buck, which is kind of a budget line knife, and it's that smooth. Let's put a drop in it. This has got a little bit of weirdness. This knife, let's look at this. This knife is, I let this get borrowed by one of the brewers. Just last thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put a drop on it. Let's see here. You guys can watch me put it in. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it. This runs on washers. Not a big fan of knives on washers. They require disassembly. Put that on there, let's see. I think that's a detent ball. I think all you're hearing on that's a detent ball. So, yeah. Put a drop on this on the detent ball in here. And we'll see if that sound goes away. It's starting to. It's starting to get a little bit. Now that knife is really dirty. I'm not even going to lie to you. That knife is filthy. Look at all that down in there. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like an instant, noticeable change in all the knives that I've, in all the knives I've used it on so far. It is like instantly noticeable that something is different. The biggest one was this. This knife was really stiff, and I put a couple drops of that on my matriarch too, and it's still not. This thing, I don't think ever will be Spidey flip, finger. You can get it part way. That's way further than I've ever gotten it before, but it's just always been really stiff, especially right there. So, yeah, like an instant mark change. And the worst case scenario is if you don't like it, it's $10. It's $10 for this bottle, and I don't know how much is in it, but it's a lot because I'm still up there, and I have lubed pretty much every knife I own just to see. I got a lot of knives. So, all right, guys, a little bit longer video than usual. Last thing I wanted to touch on, the video from yesterday did have to come down. I had to take it down. Jim did not at all reach out to me and ask me to take that video down. You guys know that I wouldn't do it. Google didn't ask me to take it down this time. The comment section had gotten to the point where it was very abusive, it was toxic, and I just did not want that comment section to be a toxic scenario like that. I don't like that. For you guys, a lot of you guys have been subscribers for me from day one, and I think of you almost like family now, especially after the whole thing with my father, and most of you guys were the ones that funded that trip home. And so I don't want that for you guys. I want that comment section to be someplace where you're not being abused, where people are not being mean to each other, and none of it, very little of it was addressed at Jim or I. It was addressed between the comment section. So just it got to where I couldn't moderate it. So that being said, I took it down. All right, guys, like I said, longer video than usual. I'm going to get this put together, cobbled up. I'm going to try and get it up today. There will be a link to their website here for this stuff in the end screens, right about here somewhere, and down in the comment section. So if you're interested in it, feel free. Knives, it's been a crazy week. Knives have not quite went out yet. I am waiting. I don't want to make multiple trips. I have a bunch of stuff that I've got to send out. It's all in the counter now. It just needs boxed up and go out. I'm waiting on one guy for a little bit of payment, and then all of it's going to go out either tomorrow or Friday. This weekend, I'm not going to be doing anything, so if you have knives that are with me for refinish, they won't get done until next week. If they don't get done next week, I'm going to be at Blade the week after. Yes, I am going to be at Blade West. You can come find me. Look for this hat, this face, and a crazy sharp shirt. I'll have a little munchkin with me, a little hobbit that will also be wearing a crazy sharp shirt. So that way we're tiered. So if you're looking down, you can probably still see it, and there I am. And I will be spending a good bit of time probably at Rat Bastard Knives over at my friend Nathan's table, saying hi and hanging out and stuff like that. But you guys will see me around the show. All right, not to make a long video longer. Love you guys. You guys take it easy. Please, please be respectful of everybody in the comment section. I can't have this channel become a toxic place. So, all right, you guys take it easy. I'll see you next time.